To me, Vogue was always a kind of a vision of a world. It wasn't specifically about fashion. It was about a kind of glamorous, exciting world that I hoped I might one day be a part of, which was theatre, music, fashion, literature, sculpture, all kinds of things, the arts, I guess, as much as fashion. Anyway, so I thought what I really wanted to do with Vogue was to try and keep it up as a kind of record, really, of a kind of contemporary culture, which was a mixture of high-end and mainstream. And my Vogue's been very driven by the world that it exists in, and that's what I'm interested in, producing a magazine that's kind of part of the culture rather than something that stands entirely in its own bubble. And so to that end, I brought in things like the High Street, which hadn't been in it before. I brought in much more first-person writing, people talking about their own experiences, which hadn't really been in it before. Brought in a bigger range of photographers with a kind of broader remit of what fashion photography might actually be than I think was previously in it. So, I mean, in a way, I kind of messed the whole thing up a bit, but it's been great fun doing it.
And although you've been bringing other things in from a more popular world, the actual world of fashion itself is changing. And the internet has its role in that. I know you've talked in the past about the democratization of fashion and how it's becoming more accessible. I mean, like the thing on the people's seats now.
Yeah.
I don't know if
I haven't seen it, but yeah.
You might not subscribe to it, but people might be able to see what you're wearing and what you've chosen.
It's a terrible idea.
Do you think that's a positive change?
I think that fashion should not be elitist in any way. It should be available to everybody, and everybody should be able to be a part of fashion. And actually, one of the things I feel is that there was a period in time when sort of individuality got quite stamped out by the fact that labels and a sort of fashion industry really grew and became a much more kind of entrenched part of our culture. And I'm very pleased to see that now we've kind of come out the other way, and with things like the street style photography and the blogs and things like the thing you were just talking about. Everybody's able to participate, and I think it encourages people to look much more idiosyncratic and to feel that they can have their own style. I guess it comes down a bit to what you define fashion as. Is individual style necessarily fashion? I'm not sure whether that's exactly the right word for it, and there has to be a place for fashion that is very purist and trying to achieve a certain kind of aesthetic impact, I suppose. I think that a lot of people buy Vogue for that thing that I talked about originally, which is this idea of a kind of an ultra glamorous world out there, and I think it would be a terrible mistake to think that that wasn't our remit. You know, where else do you see wonderful photographs of the couture, but in Vogue you just don't. Nobody else even photographs it.
How has celebrity influenced how fashion is changing?
I guess just when I came to Vogue, about 92, 93, everyone got fed up with the supermodels. They were incredibly demanding. They were very, very expensive. There were only about 8 of them that you wanted to work with, and everybody wanted to work with them. And really, that became a kind of collective feeling that we were all too much in the thrall of a very few, very successful, very beautiful girls. Everybody was looking at a way to not to have to deal with the supermodels' agents. And so that was one of the reasons why the move towards putting film stars on the cover happened. in a way, the problem started again with film stars, and you get very few film stars that everyone wants on the cover, so everyone's starting to look at other things that they might be able to put on the cover. Most people want to buy the magazine if they have some kind of relationship to the person on the cover that goes beyond simply how that person looks. So a recognizable person is helpful if you want to sell a magazine, and I do want to sell the magazine. I mean, I'm driven by wanting to sell the magazine. So one of the things that we all thought, and me in particular, because really I'm a kind of music something or other manqué, is what I wanted to be in, but I got fired so many times from the music industry, I ended up going into journalism. Thought, well, there are such great singers now and performers, and one of the things that we knew people love are festivals, and music was such a popular part of the culture. So we went on a kind of a rampage, really, of putting musical stars on the cover. And the interesting fact I will share with you is that actually they haven't sold at all well.
And I read somewhere you wrote, ultimately, the fashion industry sells fantasy. Part of that fantasy is what seems to me is what you could be. What do you think about, could you say a bit more about the role of fantasy in fashion?
Just on a very kind of mundane level, you buy something because, maybe you buy it because you need it, but 8 times out of 10 you probably buy it because at that moment you have a vision of what your life might be like if you have that dress or if you get that new lipstick, and it's kind of a better place than where you are right that moment, or at least I think it normally is. And I've got more things in my wardrobe that I kind of envisaged would be wonderful, sunny, warm days of picnics at 10 at the evening, and that have scarcely been worn as a result of that. And so, that is a fantasy, that is a dream, and that's what I thought I was sort of buying when I bought that dress.
There's that thing, you want to be like that, you want to be sitting there in a picnic. And what are the ethical limits to the thought, I want to be like that, I want to be that thin?
Had a really interesting experience today in the fashion room. We had a model a very successful model, I'm not going to say who she was, in last week, trying on some clothes just for a shoot, and everyone was like, she was so lovely and really sweet and very, very thin. And anyway, I was asking my fashion editor how the shoot went, and she said, well, it was great, but she had a really hard job getting into the clothes. And I'm like, there is no way that that particular person could not get into the trousers. I want to know what the style numbers were. I'm writing to every designer that produced those trousers because it's completely unacceptable that somebody who is so thin could not fit sample sizes. So I did write a letter, and obviously it hasn't made any difference. The sample sizes are still, not all of them by any means, but a lot of them too small. The problem with that is that sample sizes are what all magazines use to shoot in, and therefore it limits the choice of women, or men too probably, that you can use to wear the clothes in the magazine. So therefore you buy this kind of, a very kind of small thing. You are by necessity only showing a very small selection of body types. And, I definitely think that that is wrong. Unfortunately, I alone can't change that. And, but I do think that Vogue is doing something called the Health Initiative, which is where we're really going to work much harder now with the model agents to ensure that models are healthy. We never use models who are under 16. We never knowingly use any models who've got eating disorders or are very unhappy or not well looked after. I mean, we really do our best, but we only have the evidence of our eyes and the shoot. We don't actually know what happens when somebody goes home, and that's when the real person obviously emerges. So we're trying to do our bit. But I also think that in general, that is improving, that there is growing to be a kind of more of an interest in people accepting different body types. But you know, the truth is that tabloids, weekly magazines, I mean, they're the ones who go around ringing cellulite on people's thighs or doing hit or miss and clothes. And we don't ever do that. We never publish diets. We never say somebody's too fat. We never ever talk about how somebody doesn't look as good as they ought to look, or how they're letting themselves down. And I think, you know, there is a lot of the press who are so critical, and they have to change their ways, definitely.
Is the fashion industry under crazy pressure to always set the trend faster and faster? You going on the internet tonight? Has it all gone mad?
I think there is a pressure to deliver more and more. It's kind of a pressure in every way, though, for everybody, I think, to deliver more and more. I mean, literally living in this kind of 24-hour world where people can get a hold of you online by this gadget in your pocket the whole time. I think everybody is under a kind of pressure to constantly produce and make something new. I sort of think it's also up to individuals to find a way of working and of being and of producing that they're comfortable with. I think one has to take some responsibility for saying, you know, what you're some people can produce more than other people. Some people can deal with more stress than other people. Don't make yourself be unhappy, be stressed all the time. I don't think the world's gone mad, but I think people feel a lot of pressure that maybe they don't have to. Oh. I can probably hear you.
I'm done as employer. Going back to the question surrounding body image, would you say that there's a role for models, going back to the dreaming element, in the sense that we would never expect to have Formula One racing drivers that weren't essentially very fast? So when we're looking at what we would like to become, they are essentially the best that they can be within that role. Would you say that that's how you justify these girls being so thin?
You make a really good point. You say racing drivers have to be fast. I mean, the point is that fashion models, they wear clothes, they walk up and down a catwalk. Relatively few things that they have to do. There are relatively few of them who are very successful. There are so many other things in the world that you can do that are possibly more interesting and possibly more fulfilling, and where you don't have to be a size 6 to do it. So I think, yeah, you're right. I mean, if you're a model, at the moment, as a fashion model, you have to be thin. So if you're not very thin and you're not very tall, you know, why not think about being something else? But it brings me on to a point I really would like to make, because it is my complete kind of hobby horse at the moment, is I think that it's very sad that young women, I mean, like teenage girls really, that most of them really want to be, you know, like Cheryl Cole or a model or Kat Deely, or somebody who's, you know, it's a relatively narrow prescription of existence, really. And I think part of the problem is that it's very hard to find glamorous, fashionable role models in sort of serious industries. And I think, you know, if only there were more scientists and possibly horse trainers and physicians and doctors and everything shown to be publicized, one, but also shown to, you know, have great fingernails, false eyelashes, love mini skirts, then you'd have more teenage girls thinking, well, that's what I want to be. But when you have a rather dour, serious, always looking person who's doing something more cerebral, I can see that it doesn't seem like so much fun. So, I mean, it's one of the things I'm trying to do is get more and more women who, in a broader range of activities, in the magazine, but looking fashionable. But then they have a problem because in this country, there is this kind of inverse, what's the word I'm looking for, where you get criticized if you look too fashionable and too well dressed, and people say, well, you know, she's a lightweight because she really cares about wearing Jimmy Choo shoes. Well, you know, why does that make you a lightweight? But it's a problem.